All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Bruce Jacobs, and we're doing our second show now of This is Constitutional with Bruce Jacobs. Many of you listening to the first show, very thankful for all the views we got, all the comments. It was really a nice way to see the first show take off. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about, I'm a former Miami prosecutor. I have spent 25 years practicing law in Miami, and the last 13 I've been fighting banks and foreclosures. And since the crash in 2008, we've seen a lot of injustice, a lot of fraud, a lot of people losing their homes when they shouldn't have. And it kind of started for me a whole journey that is still going on today because, I swore an oath not just to zealously defend my clients, but to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And, with everything I see going on in the world today and all the division, all the anger, all the misinformation, everything that we're seeing here, I have just kind of come to recognize that there's a certain truth that I believe in that we all have to kind of stick together. We all have to get through this world together. We all have to work together. And there has to be a level of integrity. There has to be a level of truth that we're all going to agree to. And I'm watching this, from the eyes of, a foreclosure defense lawyer. And many of you know our first guest last week was Ana Lazaro Rodriguez. She served 19 years in Fidel Castro's prisons. 60 years ago, she was a revolutionary, just like those people we saw a couple, a week or two ago that were, protesting in Cuba. Many of those people now are going to go through what Anna went through, being, ghosted in the middle of the night by the police and being put into prisons for, decades on end, where they'll be beaten and tortured and humiliated and dehydrated and starved. And that's the kind of country that we should never live in. And the only thing that protects us from living in that kind of country is our Constitution. And when you look at what happened to Anna Lazaro's case, so this is kind of a chance to update everybody on what happens. But before I do, I just want to take a moment and introduce our next get another client of mine. This is Maria Williams James. She is a former retired educator here in Miami-Dade County school systems. Her husband was also an educator, and he was a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He flew fighter pilot missions, an African American fighter pilot.
No, he's white.
I'm sorry, a fighter pilot in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And now she's a victim of a fraudulent foreclosure. And I just want to take a minute and welcome you to the show, Ms. Williams James. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And I know that you've been through a lot with your foreclosure situation.
Yes, the last 11 years.
And just to kind of, before we go over to what happened to Anna's case, you also have one of these Bank of America foreclosures, correct?
Yes, sir, I do.
And it was one of the ones that has these rubber stamp from Countrywide and the evidence we were fighting about, that the evidence is all fraud, it's forgery, it's perjury, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I think is interesting about your case, which in the 13 years I'm practicing foreclosure defense, you are the shining example, the most unique case I've ever had. Because not only is there fraud in just the regular prosecuting of a foreclosure, but can you tell us when they put you in foreclosure? They said you hadn't paid your mortgage in a long time, right?
Yes, sir.
And how'd that work out?
Well, in the first foreclosure, it started in 2010 through 2013. They put me in foreclosure, but I proved that I paid all of my mortgage payments, and it was dismissed by Judge Jennifer Bailey, I believe, and I thought everything was okay.
So let me just take a minute because I want to just kind of let people understand the type of issues you see in foreclosures. Now you had a mortgage that was what, like $50,000, something like
$51,700
that, right? And you paid on that mortgage religiously, did you not?
every month, and I proved that.
How did you? What would you do? You went down. You just mailed in a check online. How did it work?
No, I mailed in my check every month,
And
and
you
in certain cases, I sent cashier's checks.
and you had copies of all of it, right?
I had copies of front and back to verify that Bank of America not only received the check but cashed it, because every bank has their own routing number, and my bank searched it and provided me with that information that Bank of America had all of the money.
And even though you had paid all of your payments,
Yes, sir.
they put you in foreclosure.
I had to prove that.
No, they sued you for foreclosure,
Foreclosure, yes, sir.
right? Saying that you never paid.
They told me I had not paid a mortgage since 2010.
And you were still making payments while the foreclosure was going on,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And were they crediting your payments? Were they doing
No, they
anything?
were not.
They were just pretending like it didn't exist.
It was like my payments went up in smoke or something. I really don't understand that.
And after 3 years of fighting to save your house,
Yes,
did they ever get a judgment against you for foreclosure? In that case, they did, right?
they did, but Judge Bailey looked
Right.
at the evidence that I had, and I showed that I paid my mortgage.
So I
And she
find that to be
vacated the judgment.
so interesting that Bank America sues you for foreclosure while they're taking your payments, and they have taken all your payments.
Yes, sir.
And they did they know at some point that you had made all your payments,
Yes, sir.
and they still move forward with the foreclosure?
Yes, sir.
And that is, to me, part of the problem we face in these cases is that people will just proceed on because they represent banks, and you're a number to them, right? You're not a person,
No.
and they, even if you presented your evidence that they paid, they still were going forward admitting that you paid, right?
Yes, they admitted it at the end that in fact, I had paid those years.
Right. And it took a judge over fighting against, they were fighting against you when the judge ruled, no, she paid,
Paid, right.
and vacated your judgment due to fraud,
Fraud. Yeah, yeah,
right?
because she said that the final judgment was fraud because I put the checks,
You paid them.
I paid them.
Right. Now, think about that. Bank America got a judgment. There was evidence that she paid the whole way through. They were trying to sell her house on a $50,000 mortgage. And even after they know that she paid and they admit that she paid, they're still fighting to sell the house. That's what we're dealing with in these foreclosure cases. That's horrible. That's despicable. And these banks, Bank America, we didn't even get in your first foreclosure. Did you even know that all the evidence that they were relying on was fraudulent?
No, I didn't.
You were just dealing with the fact that you paid, right? You didn't know that that they had forged the endorsement that was used
No,
to
I didn't
present.
know any of that. I
Right.
just was paying my mortgage like I always was taught to do.
So what I love about Miss William James's story, is when you really think about where we stand right now, you know, where's Bank America is supposed to be a good corporate citizen, right? This is a huge, almost $3 trillion bank that 10 years ago, when they crashed the economy, had only $1.5 trillion. And what's happening is that they are, I think, a threat. They're a danger to democracy. They are a danger to the country. Thomas Jefferson said, banks and the nations and the corporations that rise up with them will one day leave us homeless and penniless, and the nation our fathers founded. And what I think is amazing about your case, Miss Williams James, is that you were just saying I paid my mortgage. You had no idea there was a much bigger systemic fraud going on in foreclosures that involved your case.
No, I did not.
Right. So what ends up happening is, we had a case just last week. You were watching. I heard you said
Yeah,
you watched
the
some of our
last
show.
hour.
So I had this woman on our show, the first show, Ana Lazaro Rodriguez, who has the same fraud, only she didn't pay her mortgage.
Oh,
And what happened for Anna was she's in 70 something years old. She's living with two former political prisoners who served time with her in Castro's prisons, and one of them's dying of cancer, the other one's dying of Alzheimer's. Right? Horrible situation. And unfortunately, in this country, it's still a fact that if you have cancer, you don't get treatment unless you can afford it. So Maria was her name. Maria had asked Ana Lazaro Rodriguez to help her by taking out a loan against the house, which when the countrywide loan officer came to offer her the loan, she told the guy, I don't make enough money to pay off a $500,000 mortgage. I'm in my 70s. The guy's like, don't worry about it. We'll get you qualified. And they went in and they totally faked the paperwork so she could qualify for a $500,000 mortgage she would never be able to pay.
Jesus.
And then when they finally, when Maria died from cancer and all the money had been used to pay for her treatment, Ana Lazaro was left with a foreclosure. And, I think it's some ways a little heartless. I hear a lot of people say, she should have paid. And that's not, I think that you did pay.
Yes, I did.
And you ended up in the same foreclosure.
Yes, I paid faithfully. I wasn't even late.
You weren't even late. Like I love your story because I can just picture you like this old retired. No, sorry, this retired school
That's
teacher.
Okay,
right?
I am old.
You look beautiful. But I'm just saying, like the whole idea to me of like this little sweet retired school teacher who would go to the bank and take out a cashier's check and then mail it in and kept all her little records in a shoebox or whatever it is that I visualized always when I heard your story. Like you ended up in foreclosure too.
Yes, I did.
I
was quite shocked about it because I do keep pretty good records.
You kept great records. I saw them.
I was able to show every single payment.
Every payment. And to
front and back of the checks to show that Bank of America got the money.
I mean, just the fact that Judge Jennifer Bailey, who was like one of the most senior judges in Miami, vacated your judgment due to fraud. And I read the motion. I thought it was very well done. Like Bank of America admitted they got payment.
Right.
And they could yell and scream and argue all they want. They admitted they got paid and they foreclosed anyway. That is a fraud. And people, did anyone get in trouble, by the way, for doing that?
I don't
Did anyone
know.
ever give you back your attorney's fees you had to spend?
No.
No, they just, left you alone.
They just I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who was I going to talk to. What was I going to do?
So one of the things that I want to talk about is, so with Anna's case, right? We just had this whole evidentiary hearing this past week and a half in front of this Judge Peter Lopez. And it was a chance we were saying that you can't evict her. Anna's living in her house. She's been there since the 90s. She's going blind from macular degeneration. This is the only place she knows where everything is. She can get around blindfolded in this house, and she may need to one day.
Yes. When you're old like that, familiarity is very similar. And she's similar to you. It's very important.
And she's living with someone who's dying of Alzheimer's, who's they're both in their 80s.
Yes.
And I just wonder, like, what on earth is happening? So we go in and we have all this evidence that Bank of America created fake evidence in her case. It's like the same stuff from a decade ago that the federal government was taking Bank of America to task, making them sign consent orders and to do all kinds of other things. All that stuff happened, and Bank of America came into court and did not offer any evidence to say it wasn't true. Not a single shred of evidence to say, oh no, this wasn't a forgery. Oh, no, we didn't commit perjury. We didn't destroy 2 billion records in violation of subpoenas for those records. We didn't do any of that. They didn't come in with anything to refute any of that. What they said was, even if it's true.
Yeah, I heard
even
that
if it's true,
yeah, I heard that.
Bank of America has a privilege to commit fraud on the court.
I found that to be very, very, very unusual. I was online.
Unusual? I found that to be dangerous. Imagine,
I've never heard of that one before.
Like, think about, it was funny. I got to do my whole, like, my argument. I'm going to post it on my website at some point. But the argument that I did, we had like a whole constitutional fight because we were trying to present all the evidence of the fraud. And the judge said, all right, even though Miss Rodriguez had a consent judgment entered against her by her lawyer without her consent or knowledge. Like the lawyer was coming up for trial, said, "Yeah, we'll take a consent judgment," but never asked the client if she was willing to consent to a judgment. Just did it for her. And then we were had all this evidence that this felony fraud is going on that violates the National Mortgage Settlement, violates the 2011 OCC consent order, all these things that Bank of America should have been in a lot of trouble for. And Judge Lopez in the middle of the hearing says, "All right, I want to make sure I understand what your position is, Bank of America. You're saying that even if this is all fraud, there's a privilege that you have to commit that fraud. And this and her lawsuit to say that there's fraud in her foreclosure has to be dismissed." Yep, that's our position. And it was a moment of clarity because look at where we are in the world. Remember, our founding fathers were fighting against that small segment of the population with all the money and power that lived by a different set of laws. The people in Cuba that were out there protesting in the streets were fighting against that small segment of the population with all the money and power that lives by a different set of laws. Same thing in China, same thing in North Korea. Like that is what you see in fascist, totalitarian, dictator, tyrannical governments.
Yes.
You know, like the United States has a constitution. It's different. We're supposed to all promote the general welfare. We're supposed to establish justice. That's the purpose of our government here. And you know what happened was that the judge said even though they came in and said something that absurd, that offensive, that they have a privilege to commit fraud, judge did not take any action against them. We were able to show that Bank of America came in and did the same thing in front of Judge Lopez that Bank of New York did in front of Judge Beatrice Butchko back in June that caused Judge Butchko to start criminal contempt proceedings against the banks, Bank of America, Bank of New York Mellon, their subservicer, and even the lawyer was hit with criminal contempt charges for perjury. This is like actually happening right now in my cases. You know, we went in front of Judge Butchko with the same fraud that I tried to present in your case, right? Because we didn't, we'll get to what happens in your case in a minute again, but I went in front of this Judge Beatrice Butchko and I said, "Judge, you have to vacate this judgment for this woman, Julie Nicholas. She's probably be our next guest, a Haitian American nurse who raised 3 kids in her house, single mother, and fell into foreclosure because she was out of work for 3 months. And they never helped her out. She could pay. She did everything they asked her to do, loan mod after loan mod, paid thousands of dollars in temporary modification payments. And then they got a judgment against her. And we went in and said, this is fraud. And Judge Butchko was just hearing it straight. God bless her. And during the middle of it, the lawyers presented a witness who said, no, Bank of America, we don't know what their relationship is to us. They're not the master servicer. Those rights were sold years ago. But meanwhile, the evidence is that the Bank of America is the master servicer.
Yes.
And they were lying. And Judge Butchko did what she's supposed to do. She issued a contempt order. You lied to me. Let's deal with that. And the banks ran up to the appellate court here in Miami and filed emergency petitions, all 4 of them. And what they said was that Judge Butchko was dishonest. They said was she was entering that contempt order because Bruce Jacobs has some, quote, special influence over her that's improper, that I have the power to make a circuit court judge accuse another lawyer of perjury, quote, without any factual basis or due process, unquote. And meanwhile, she did everything she's supposed to do, and they totally lied to her. It was obvious. It was perjury. So now, while that's going on, what we just had in front of Judge Lopez was Bank of America comes in and says, no, we sold our servicing rights on this loan too. We're not the master servicer. Meanwhile, I have recorded public powers of attorney from multiple states that say Bank of America is the master servicer.
Yeah.
They lied to Judge Lopez too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little different because Judge Lopez didn't take any action. He didn't do anything about it. But then he eventually just shuts down the hearing. Just as we're about to get into the tell us why this isn't a forgery, all of a sudden now we're going to argue this constitutional argument on Anna's case. And it was a really, people don't understand. It's not that the judge said that what they did was legal. What the judge said was, even if there's fraud, even if it's felonies of forgery and perjury, even if the bank is violating the national mortgage settlement and lying to judges and doing all of this, it's still constitutional to throw Anna Lazaro out of her house by the foreclosure. That's the ruling.
How can it be?
It's not. There is no basis to say that you can deprive someone of their property without due process, because it's in the Constitution that no person shall be deprived of their property without due process.
Is there, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
With all of this going on here in Miami-Dade County, and
It's not just Miami, it's Miami to Maui. It's all over the country.
but I'm just saying, I have looked at a lot of the foreclosures that were filed
Sure.
here in Miami-Dade County. And everyone that I've come in contact with says the same thing: it's fraud, including myself, because they say one thing, you prove this, you prove that you paid,
Right?
and it doesn't do you any good.
Right?
So my question is that with the mortgage, there's three things you have to worry about: paying the mortgage, if you have a mortgage, taxes, and insurance.
Right?
And you're dealing with numbers.
Right?
That's a clean cut science.
Right?
It's not this circumstance
But
of
this
that
isn't science.
is the numbers.
But this is not science.
But if the numbers match and you can show that you paid this, money can constitute the numbers. You
Yeah.
paid it. How is that not enough?
I mean, here's what I want to make sure I understand. Your case is just the most shining, most glaring example of the injustice of what we're seeing in these foreclosure cases. You paid your mortgage, they've used fraudulent evidence, and they're still taking your house. That's not American. That's unconstitutional. That's
Is
wrong.
there something in the government that we can
So
file?
we're here doing the show to try to get people to understand. When you look at what happened in Anna Lazaro's case, the judge said that there's a statute that was passed a couple of years ago that says, it's called the Finality of Judgment Statute, says even if everything that Anna said is true, even if it's all fraud and the banks lie and their best defense is that they have a privilege, there is a statute that says that all Anna can sue for is money damages. She cannot get her house back. That's a statute that got passed. And I get the purpose of the statute. You had systemic fraud in foreclosures, and they didn't want anyone coming back and trying to mess up all the sales that had happened. But Anna's living in her house still.
Yes.
She's being evicted when we know it's fraud. And, the judge has issued his ruling, and we're about to go back and explain to him, like, the idea that there's any reasonable, rational basis to do that is, in my mind, just misguided. It's just not accurate. The Constitution says what it says. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. And that's what this statute does. But it gets worse, because now what we're seeing is that there are cases that people have filed for money damages trying to sue, and the district courts and the banks are taking the cases up to the district courts and federal court, and the federal judges are dismissing them, saying, oh, there's doctrine of res judicata, there's a doctrine of collateral estoppel, there's the Rooker-Feldman doctrine, there's all these different reasons why it's a judgment, you can't attack it. So at the end of the day, she gets nothing. She doesn't even have a claim for damages. And all of it.
That seems unfair to the consumer. You work hard to pay for a house.
It's unconstitutional. That's my problem, is you can't do any of this because it's unconstitutional. Now, what happened with Anna's case is the judge said, I'm finding that statute constitutional. Because she has a claim for money damages, she can be thrown out of her house without due process. I'm going to fight like hell with that. And I'll tell you, we had Florida Senator Ileana Garcia, Florida Senator Jason Pizzo. We got a lot of people that are starting to take action on this because it is offensive. That woman is a hero to the Cuban community,
Yes.
and now she's going to be forced from her home without due process. Like, that's offensive to me.
Yes.
But what happens now is that, the judge said we've got until the end of the month, and then they're going to let the sheriff go out and evict her.
Oh God. Please no.
So the fight's not over for her,
Oh,
and the
God.
fight's not over for you. But I wanted to just carry on with your story a little bit more, because what happened with you, I think, is the most. I've never seen anything like it in 25 years of practicing law, right? Like, you proved to a judge that your judgment should be vacated due to fraud because you paid. And what happened for Miss Williams James was that Bank of America never called her to be like, okay, let's get this fixed up. Well, we're sorry we put you through all this. We have your payments. We're going to credit you. We'll get it all squared away. They never did that. You know what they did? They transferred her servicing to somebody else and sold the loan to another company called VRMTG.
No, they sold the Green Tree first.
Well, those are the servicers. The loan itself was sold away and the servicers changed. And those new guys just, basically kept going forward saying, you never made any payments.
But I made payments.
And what I thought was interesting, like what I understand from your case now, having gone through this with you, is that you were still paying Bank of America for years,
Yes.
right? Like every month, $300 a month, like clockwork.
Okay.
And every month, Bank of America got your check and cashed it,
Yes.
right? And they never once told the new servicer that they were doing that.
Mm-mm. They never credit my account.
They never did anything. The money just sat. You paid the party that you thought was the right party to pay your mortgage.
It's not only what I thought. I have several papers, even after they claim to have changed service, that says that Bank of America is my service.
Right. And all of this happens. And meanwhile, the new servicer files another foreclosure.
Right.
And is suing you for the same exact foreclosure that Bank of America sued you for, saying that you didn't pay since January of 2010.
Yes.
And asking for a judgment that says you haven't paid since January 2010, which Bank of America had already gotten and had gotten vacated due to fraud.
Yes.
Right. And, I got involved in your case, I think it was probably like 4 years into your second foreclosure, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Right. And what was happening? Like, did you ever tell the judge? Who was your judge? Barbara Reese's? Was that her name?
She's been on my case since this foreclosure, the second foreclosure started.
Right. It was like a 7-year foreclosure case, right?
Yeah. At least 6 years.
And did you have a lot of hearings in front of her?
A few, yes.
And any ones where you got to like talk to her and tell her,
Yes.
like, this is what's happening. I'm making my payments. This happened to me once before.
Yes.
I'm still making my
Make
payments.
Right.
And what was her reaction?
Very nonchalant, to tell you the truth. I would prove everything she asked me for. I had it there for her, in hard copy.
Right.
And she would look at it, and she would just kind of hunch her shoulders. Didn't really give me an answer. A good example would be one time I was in front of her, and I was complaining about the new service of Green Tree because they sent two guys unknown to me to the house, and they didn't knock on the door. They just walked around and started rattling the doors, and they actually threatened that if I didn't call this number to talk to this new servicer, they were going to actually come back and break my locks open and physically put me out of the home. And while there was 2 of them, one was walking around the back of the house.
So what did the judge do when she told
But
that?
then I told her that, and then my neighbor, before that, my neighbor got in, and the argument pursued. So I got upset, that got me all upset. So I called the police. And I went to the door. I said, I'm calling the police. Who are you? When I said I'm calling the police, they ran away.
I mean, this is Green Tree, right? And
This is Green Tree,
and
right?
one of the things I loved about when we were presenting your case at trial in front of Judge Arises, we had the newspaper clippings you had. Green Tree was doing this kind of stuff,
Yes,
heavy-handed tactics against borrowers
right. And they
all
were
over the
sued,
country.
right? And they were sued for it.
Like $62 million judgment they had to pay.
63 to be exact.
So what happened with the judge though? How did
Anyway,
she help you?
I complained to the Consumer Protection Program because I didn't feel like this.
Right.
I've never seen a mortgage company send somebody to do something like this. So I was like,
But what did the
scared.
judge do?
Anyway, I wrote to the and I got a letter back stating that they inadvertently, they didn't mean da. But anyway, to show proof that this happened to me, I gave her the letter.
What did she do?
And she gave it to the other party, and then they gave it back to me. And I said, okay, Judge, what about this? And she said, oh, well.
So what I thought was most interesting was that the Bank of America, you were like trying to sue them in this case, or trying to bring them back into the case, saying that you're back in foreclosure and they have your money.
Yes, Bank
right?
of America, that's the only company that has my money. I don't know these other people, and they don't have
So
one dime
years
for
and
me.
years and years of going on, and it's clear to me at least that you're making your payments to Bank of America on your mortgage. They have all your payments. The new servicer suing you in foreclosure, saying you didn't give us the payments. What did the judge do to resolve your money before the trial? Did she tell the Bank of America to give the money to the new servicer and have them work it all out?
No,
What'd she do?
She didn't say any. I asked her, I said, well, what about my money, Your Honor? What about my money that they have from 2010 to 2013?
Right.
What about my money? There's no accountability for
And
my
what
money.
happened?
She put her hand up, told me
She
stop.
she told you to talk to the hand?
Yes, she told me stop.
Wow.
Like that.
So I understand that what ended up happening was she ordered Bank of America to give you the money back.
Yeah, but that's from 2014 to 2018.
Right. 4 years of payments. I think it's
Right.
actually 5 years now I think about it, because it was $18,000.
No, 17,000 and change.
It was almost $18,000.
Okay.
And it was over, it was $300 a month payments
Right.
for
That
years.
was 2014 to begin 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
So Bank of America
5 years.
sends you a check for 5 years worth of payments.
Right.
And did that resolve your foreclosure?
No.
No, you're stuck in foreclosure still, right?
Right.
Did she even try to help you?
No, I even wrote back to the courts explaining about the checks. The first check was written to me and the other attorney, and I thought that was weird.
Yeah, there was like I remember
why would you send my money to me and somebody else, right? So I wrote about that. They reissued the check, but they told me, if you can't apply the money, you got to send it back. And I'm going, who am I going to apply? I asked the judge, I say, who am I going to apply this to? You told me to stop paying. What do I do with this?
So what I find is crazy is that, you're in foreclosure a second time.
Yes.
While Bank America has 5 years of your monthly payments.
Yes.
In their possession.
Yes.
Which is the money that should have been given to the new servicer that they never gave it to, right?
Mm-mm.
And the new servicer is suing you, saying that you never made the payments since 2010
Mm-hmm.
that you had made to Bank of America, and proved
right
that you paid to Bank of America.
Right.
And meanwhile,
and
I get involved.
About a new servicer. I have paperwork that says Bank of America is my servicer.
I know there was clearly a miscommunication between everyone about who the right servicer is. They're saying that the new servicer was your servicer, and you're saying it was Bank of America. That's what I believed. And
but I got paperwork to show that it
all that still leaves us in the position of someone should have stepped in here and resolved this, but they didn't. What ended up happening was that you hired me, right? And we went to trial. We had a full-blown 3 days we were in trial in your case?
Yes.
Tell me what you think about the trial.
Heartbreaking.
Why? Didn't you win?
Well, I thought I did.
right? But so tell me why you thought, even though you won the trial originally,
Yes.
tell me why it was heartbreaking.
Because it was heartbreaking for me because I just felt I was being treated so unfair. I couldn't, the facts were not presented. You know what I mean? It just, it was heartbreaking for me.
Like, I remember your trial. I think I'll never forget your trial because, we were fighting to put in all of our evidence. Not only did you pay, and that was a whole issue that, it took me forever to understand and be able to really piece together what had happened. But for me, like, I saw just the fraud in the court that I deal with in front of Anna Lazaro's case, the stuff from Julie Nicholas's case. Like, this is the systemic fraud. The evidence that they were using to prove they had the right to foreclose was all fake. It was forgeries and fake assignments and things like that. And that was my big fight. And do you think what was your take about the court? Was the court being impartial, like keeping an open mind to the idea that there was
I think
fraud?
that it was biased against me, to be honest with you, and I think it was biased because of the different things that I presented to the court that were facts, and to prove that they were lying, it was never addressed. It was just like moved over.
Right? Like
Like for example, my taxes for 2016. That was one of the things that they say I did not pay. You remember my check came up showing that I paid the 2016 taxes with the portfolio number there
I mean,
to verify.
I think that all that, like, what I agree with you is that we were not allowed to present our evidence of fraud.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, it was like it's all right for them to tell this lie. They told the lie that I didn't pay. I proved in court with you that I did pay. Why was that not addressed?
So I think that, one of the things I loved about Judge Butchko is you walk into her courtroom and you commit fraud, you lie to her, she's going to use her inherent contempt powers to deal with that, because that is part of being a judge. You have to maintain and uphold and enforce the highest standards of practice in your courtroom. Otherwise, people come in and lie to you.
Right.
And they think they can do it with impunity.
Well, this was a lie that the bank's attorney
I mean,
presented.
let me say this: there were many,
but this particular one that lies. Was blatant that I proved.
I mean, I know you want to always focus on one thing. I'm just telling you, Ms. Williams,
there was more.
There
I know,
was
but I'm not an attorney.
way more fraud that was going on.
Yeah.
And you had a judgment that was vacated due to fraud. And what was interesting to me was that the whole trial went on, and I did my best to get your evidence in, and it was all excluded. Everything that I wanted to show, I was told I'm not allowed to present it. And then we win the trial on a technicality. Imagine we don't win on fraud, that they committed like fraud about everything that was going on, about your payment of your taxes, about the evidence being fraud, about the fact that you paid all your mortgage payments. We don't win any of that. We win on the fact that the lawyer forgot to put in the evidence that the prior judgment was vacated. That's what we won on, because when they submitted the original note into the court file, it was marked canceled, and the only way that cancellation is undone is if you vacate the judgment. And my whole argument was, hey, he blew it. He could have won. He just forgot to do that. And she was all over that. I think that at the end of the day, your testimony was some of the most compelling I've ever heard, because I mean, just to see how like you were almost needing medical attention with your high blood pressure.
Yeah, my blood pressure went up because of my feelings.
It was emotional,
right? And anytime you present something and you want to tell the truth, and you have people around you who are not telling the truth, and they're trying to take something from you as important as my home, that's devastating.
So let me say this.
Devastating.
What is more devastating to me now is that, so after we won your trial, right? We won the trial. She said, you're right. He didn't prove that one little fact. Therefore, we win. That was months ago now. And what's happened since then is that Another case, J.P. Morgan Chase doing the same fraud with their fake, their forged endorsements and perjury and whatever else they're doing. And I go in front of Judge Arises on that case, and I say, Judge, I want you to please reconsider. We just had this trial, where there was fraud. And I think you should reconsider your decision in this J.P. Morgan Chase case not to address the fraud. And her reaction was to threaten to hold me in contempt of court. And then she starts getting upset about what happened in our trial. And I was like, but there was fraud in our trial. And all of a sudden she recuses herself.
Why was she getting upset about our trial? That's what I don't understand.
So apparently she recused herself. And what she said on the record was that, she had a problem with me. It was a personal, that I had offended her.
Right.
And look, I'm going to have problems with some judges. And
well, why didn't she recluse herself from my?
Well, hold on, we're going to get there. So what happens is that all of a sudden I start getting all these orders from her chambers on all of my cases, recusing herself, one after another, recuse, reassign them. I'm not going to be fair and impartial. And then in your case, I get a final judgment of foreclosure, and it shocked me. First off, like, why is she entering anything in your case other than order of recusal? And then the next day she enters a recusal in another case. So it wasn't like she changed her mind. But all of this is happening. And as it's happening, we're sitting here and I'm wondering, what on earth is going on here, because the judgment that she entered was a foreclosure judgment that was basically the same as the judgment that was entered against you by that Judge Bailey vacated for fraud.
Right.
It said you were still delinquent since January of 2010 when Judge Bailey already ruled that you weren't.
Because I proved to her that I paid.
And all of this to me, so I have now filed a motion. I filed a motion to disqualify the judge, saying that these are reasons to fear that you're not being impartial. You already recused yourself in all of my other cases. You said that you had a personal problem with me. That's all grounds to say that you should not be on my cases anymore. But then to reinstate a judgment that was vacated due to fraud is not right. It's not. To me, it's like, there's a provision that they talk about. If you're a judge, if you knowingly use your powers as a judge to benefit a party or to cause injury to a party, or if you're undermining the integrity of the judicial process, if you're doing that knowingly as a judge, that's not just grounds to remove you, that's grounds to disbar you. That's what the standards say. That's what the judicial bar rules standards say. If you do that,
who oversees these kinds of things?
I mean, there's right now, like, first off, we're supposed to be a self-reporting profession, so lawyers are supposed to report this to when you become a judge, there's the Judicial Qualifications Committee, which oversees all of the judges, and people file complaints, and then the judges will have to respond or not, or whatever happens with the JQC. And then if they get off the bench, then the bar would deal with them as lawyers once they're no longer on the bench. But to me, I just find it sad to think that, this is 11 years for you now, right? This journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you paid your mortgage the whole way through.
Right.
Until the judge finally said, just stop paying your mortgage, give her back the money.
Right.
And
it was her, Judge Barbara Axis told me.
Right. So
she screamed at me. She said, stop paying.
So Judge Arises knew that your judgment was vacated due to fraud, because she said on the record, that's a problem. This judgment was vacated due to fraud. She recused herself from all of my cases.
Why didn't she recuse herself from my case?
Exactly.
You're my attorney too.
And how would she reinstate a judgment that she knew was procured by fraud? And that is where we stand today, next to Judge Peter Lopez, who just said that even if it is fraud, Miss Rodriguez in her 80s with her roommate who's dying of Alzheimer's can be evicted from their homes, and that doesn't violate their constitutional rights. While Judge Butchko has started criminal contempt proceedings that were stopped by the appellate court here in Miami. And one of the things I think is interesting is I have a 101 appeals that I have filed in my career in front of the Third District Court of Appeals. And there are 11 cases pending right now, 11 appeals that have been open since 2019 is my oldest appeal. And it's one of these JP Morgan Chase fraud cases that they just stayed the case at the trial level. Judge was looking to vacate the judgment due to fraud, and they stopped it. And those proceedings have been basically stuck now for, almost 3 years. And meanwhile, there's another district court over Broward and Palm Beach. It's called the Fourth DCA. And they, 10 years ago, had a case that was Bank of New York Mellon versus Pino, which is the same people. Bank of New York Mellon are the ones going after Anna Lazaro's house. They were the ones that went after Julie Nicholas's house. I have them in all these cases with these fake endorsements. And in that case, 10 years ago, the Fourth DCA certified a question of great public importance, saying there are many, many suspect documents in foreclosures. That was when the robo-signing scam was going on. Mm-hmm. Now we have the same problem. There are many, many suspect documents in foreclosures. It's not just fake assignments. It's forged endorsements. Those are felonies. And the evidence is they just kept doing it. They never stopped.
But when is the government going to step back in to charge them with these fraudulent things?
That's, to me, is ultimately what we've got to get. That's why you got to like and share and comment on these videos. You got to get people in positions of authority, people in the media. That's why we're doing these shows, is to make sure that it is out in the open. Like, they are trying to take my bar license because I am speaking out about fraud on the court and foreclosures. Okay. And, God willing, I will be safe and I will be, protected, because what we're doing here is protecting constitutional rights.
Yes.
Of someone who paid their mortgage, who right now your house is set to be sold. You do realize that, right?
Oh, she's already made the final.
She entered a final judgment, and your house is ready, is on the courthouse steps. Mm. It's not over. We've already moved to block it. We've already filed the documents we need to file. We're going to fight, but they're trying to sell your house too, to pay off a $51,000 mortgage. How much have you paid now towards that mortgage over your lifetime?
Oh, I've been paying since 2004.
Right? So from 2004 to 2018, $300 a month. And they're still trying to sell your house.
Yeah, but then, of course, they didn't give me credit for the money that I paid.
And all of this is coming into, it's a fundamental question of the people who are in positions of authority swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and to promote the general welfare. And I think everyone kind of agrees from both sides that's not happening, right? I think we all can kind of agree that most of our elected officials are just protecting that small segment of the population.
Yes.
With all the money and power that's living by a different set of laws.
Right.
And that's what this fight is about.
How can the banks, anybody else who commits fraud, they're going to be, that's a criminal charge.
What do you think would happen if, you
How
were
can
part
they
of,
get away with fraud?
What do you think would happen if you were part of a drug dealing operation? You got caught by the feds. They gave you a plea deal. They said, we're going to let you off easy, and you have to promise to stop doing this. And they caught you a week later still selling drugs. They'd put you under the prison.
Yes.
And that's exactly what these banks did. They were caught committing fraud. They promised to stop doing it. They paid $25 billion when they have trillions of dollars.
Exactly.
And they never stopped doing it.
And the thing of it is that hurts the consumer most with what you just said. By the time the government steps in, hundreds of thousands of people have lost their homes.
We saw
the money that the big banks make.
What we watched
is awful.
What we're watching is the largest transfer of wealth from the middle class, from the poor and middle classes, to even the upper middle classes, to the 1%. That's why these banks have now, they're twice as big as they were in 2008 when they were too big to fail. And I advocate that we need to break these banks up. We do not need Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase and HSBC Bank. These banks are now criminal enterprises.
Yes.
They are violating the racketeering statute.
Yes.
And that is a reason to break them up. We can keep all the infrastructure and keep all the systems and keep everyone doing what they need to do. But why should the profit streams go to the hands of those small segment of the population with all the money and power when they're running these criminal enterprises? Why don't we divert that money to help promote the general welfare? Imagine if we used the profits of Bank of America to build affordable housing,
Yes.
to provide health care, and we could do a lot if we didn't have to give all this money to these billionaires who just want to go and have these giant races to see who can make the most ridiculous spaceship to take them into orbit for, not even orbit, just into weightlessness for 20 minutes.
Yes.
Like, we're wasting this society that is such a great country.
More than that, a lot of minority people are suffering badly. We work hard for the few pennies that we get, and we try to pay our bills. And when you do that, pay your bills, and then someone comes to you and takes something from you, that is devastating. And it's been devastating for me. My blood pressure medicine has increased twice.
I mean, I think that what you're saying is,
and that's my health.
One of the things I think that is really important to point out is what you're talking about is something that has been documented countrywide. And Washington Mutual, these banks that are now with Chase and Bank of America, engaging all the, they took over all those Countrywide and Washington Mutual were the largest purveyors of subprime mortgages. They're the ones that went out and found everyone who was from a community of color, African American, Hispanic, the elderly, the first-time home buyers, the people who couldn't qualify for a federally backed mortgage. Their credit wasn't good enough, whatever it was. The vast majority of people who ended up in these countrywide loans that ended up in foreclosure ended up in a fraudulent foreclosure. And they did not get help. Most people get a modification that got a modification defaulted on the modification.
That's hard.
Why? Because the modifications weren't helping.
No.
And we're about to go through this again right now. We're watching today. They just reinstated for certain areas of the country, like ours, where COVID is getting, out of control again, a temporary eviction moratorium. But people are going. There will be millions of people put out in the street from this moratorium. And what's going to happen to those properties? They're going to get sold to Wall Street bankers. We're going to come in and start setting up REITs to, real estate investment trust funds, whatever they are, to start renting these places out. We're going to be a nation of renters. And all that equity, all that wealth that you could have built, they're going to take. It's going to take.
Yeah.
And I hope that people realize this is why it matters, A, that you vote, and B, who you vote for.
Exactly.
And God willing, we'll be able to convince those people who swore the oath to protect and defend the Constitution to wake up and realize that they owe their duty of loyalty to the American people, to promote the general welfare, not the welfare of this select few of people that have all the money and power.
Yeah. What about the housing, the big housing guy in Washington that's over the housing authority?
Like HUD, I'll say it like this. I think that right now we are in a position where we need to get the government to understand that this is happening.
That's what I'm saying. Are they aware?
I mean, I think that what's happening is that it is getting louder and louder and louder that this problem is happening, and it's becoming so. Like, I think that there's all of, like, between me and President Biden and Kamala Harris, who was the Attorney General, the Vice President was the Attorney General of California at the time of the National Mortgage Settlement. She is Vice President now because of what she did as Attorney General with this National Mortgage Settlement.
Yeah, I know.
That was one of the first things that they talked about, was she took on the banks.
Yes.
But she doesn't know what's happening here.
No. That's why I'm saying shouldn't we be transferring all this information and all this data that you proceed to tell everybody about? Shouldn't you be putting it in the government's hands, the
So
government
I'll say
ears
like
at
this:
least, just so that they can hear it?
the government has this at the lowest levels, and the question is, are they going to let it ride up and go up the chain all the way to the top, or is some low-level bureaucrat going to stop it because it doesn't want to come out? Like right now, what I believe is that this is going to stop once it becomes untenable. And God willing, your story and Ana Lazaro Rodriguez's story, I think that when the African American community and the Cuban community and Miss Julie Nichols from the Haitian community, if we can start to really unify, why are we letting these banks do this? What is the benefit to the United States of America to have all of this money going to this very small segment of the population while all these people are suffering? If
and they're suffering due to fraudulent information.
I mean, look, these banks have become criminal enterprises. They launder money for drug dealers and Iranian terrorists. They were caught rigging the LIBOR rates. Wells Fargo opened millions of accounts for people all over the country, knowing that they were just going to use it to steal money from them. And they were just getting overdraft fees and whatever fees they were getting from people who didn't even know the accounts existed. And nobody goes to prison. And it's going to take, that's why we're doing the show. That's why I'm saying this is constitutional. If you know that you care about the Constitution, then you're going to do something to speak out about it. You're going to reach out to your congressman. You're going to reach out to your senators. You're going to reach out to the media. You're going to share this video, like it, make it go viral. Like, this is something worthy of going viral. Imagine Bank of America defied the U.S. government, kept committing fraud in court. Now, 10 years later, is after millions of homeowners got thrown out of their homes by fake evidence, is saying, oh, well, we have a privilege to do that. And to think that Ana Lazaro Rodriguez is going to be evicted from her home, even when they know that that's going on, maybe they do have a privilege.
It seems as though they have bought a privilege.
And if they have a privilege, then do we have a constitution? Because I know the 14th Amendment, says that, there's equal protection, meaning that if, so there's a lawyer in Pasco County, guy was a foreclosure defense lawyer. And during the big run, when there were lots of foreclosures going on, he got busted. He was forging endorsements in going to the clerk's file and going into the note and forging the endorsement. And he won the case. He beat Bank of America, of all banks, over and over and over again by forging the endorsements. And they caught him on video. There he is, forging the endorsements. And they prosecuted him. And with no hesitation, they not only just barred him, but he's now serving 9 years in prison because he forged endorsements. Where's his privilege? Does he have a privilege too? Or is it just Bank of America and their lawyers?
Exactly. That's the question that myself and others as consumers think, that big banks with their big money are buying their power.
Well, I think that what we all need to see, the reason why I think this show is hopefully going to be meaningful in the world, is we need to reclaim our government from that small segment of the population with all the money and power before we lose our government. Yeah. We came real close just a couple of months ago. Like, that was really scary what happened in January in Washington, D.C. And there are a lot of people who, when you don't understand what we're really fighting about, we're fighting for, there's so much misinformation, so much disinformation, so much effort to divide us and conquer us. And it's always been the same thing. It's always been that small segment of the population with all the money and power trying to live by a different set of laws.
No, in other words, that upper 1%, 2% that you're speaking of, they can, like President Trump said, you could go out and murder somebody and still walk away.
Look, I think that we are
crime is among the rich and the famous is really nothing.
I mean, the reality is that that only works until until people stand up and say, this is our Constitution. We believe in it. We're going to fight for it.
Well, I think more than anything, Mr. Bruce, is, Jacobs, is that perhaps you need to get all of this stuff to the upper people in Washington,
That's what we're working
D.C.,
on.
and hopefully they will do something before poor people like myself, Ms. Rodriguez. We don't have many days ahead of us,
Right.
and we do not want to be homeless.
So let me say this. I want to thank you, Ms. Williams James. I want to thank your husband for his service to our
Yes.
country. I want to thank you for your courage and your determination through all this, and also your faith in allowing me to represent you and to fight for you.
Yes.
And I want people to know, like, there's a lot of us out there who, understand that this is wrong. And we all have an obligation to protect and defend the Constitution, or we're going to lose it.
Yes.
So please contact the media, contact your representatives, do whatever you can. Let's make sure that small segment of the population with all the money and power lives by the same laws the rest of us do. All right. This is Constitutional with Bruce Jacobs. Everyone have a blessed week, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks so much.